Welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings Here. Sort of. Mostly. In a brain. You know, it's just one of the many on Earth. And, just, you know, what did it notice this week? So I guess that's pretty much all I do now. Anyway, well, that's not all I do. But anyway, life sucks, guy. Did a really nice video. He always participates in the Why I'm an Anti-Natalist contest, which is really good of him. And this year's entry's got to be a winner. It's almost a documentary, I'd say. Pretty much, you know, telling a story and a nice kind of narrative, and you know, kept my interest. You know, and certainly the point was well made. You know, just on a simple human personal story kind of way. And you'd say kind of, you know, you could, you know, in hindsight, if people saw these kind of videos 50 years ago or 60 or 70, depending on your age, your parents might have, you know, they were smart enough to maybe give it some thought. Because it kind of does put it on a person to say, really, do you really think you can control the experiment, that you're going to guarantee the outcome, that somehow it's not going to leave somebody in a terrible position? You're not going to be, you know, sending your kid off in a rickety lifeboat, you know, because your Titanic sank. And, you know, that's real. That's something to ponder for most people, I think, with any kind of decent ethics. Now, obviously, there's people who are just cold. You know, they're just, you know, I make jokes about sometimes, you know, that I'm kind of reptilian. You know, I like it warm, you know, and there's lots of things in common. Lots of things not in common, but you know what I mean. You can always find the similarities. But you know, there's people who are just, you know, it's just shark eyes. You know, they just don't see the carnage around them. They don't, you know, if they don't experience it, it just doesn't mean anything. And then there are people who do the "what if that was me" thing all the time, and recognize that all of this is just risk. Every moment you're playing, there's any moment now. There is a bomb on the game board. You know, there are little hidden bombs. And little bombs can go off. You know, you get one of those horrible phone calls or emails or texts now. And, you know, you end up in a spiral that just goes into just uglier and uglier places. And it's not, you're not visiting Oz. You're you're visiting Freddy's Nightmare. And you just go from episode to episode, and it gets very tiring, you know, and it's not good. So anyway, I'll leave a link below. Death of the Family, kind of just his personal story, where, you know, kind of the ironic case where he probably didn't need any of this persuading. You know, he didn't need real life to be this brutal to tell him, you know, to make him already a cautious human. And so it was all just sort of a waste. It was wasted on the wrong man. But, you know, it's just, you know, life sucks. You know, I mean, there are a lot of channels with that title I did. So that's one of the things I found today as news. And I'm thinking, gee, you know, if people are going to title that, you know, I ought to go check out all these little channels and see why these people are saying something that makes sense to say. It's just not good enough. I mean, I guess there aren't going to be too many people who are going to name the channel "Life Isn't Good Enough," but I guess I could try to find the variations on the theme. You know, that it's just too imperfect. Way too imperfect. You know, and it's just way too expensive, and way too victim creating, and way too just plainly stupid in terms of it being just too reckless and uncontrollable. Again, if there was some way you could use your initiative, your free will, somehow you could use some like you could buy insurance against all of the crap that can happen. Then you could argue that maybe somebody could have some reason to be confident enough to take the step, to say, I'm going to boldly go into, this area, where it's on you. So that's sort of the point of it, I'd say, is that it just kind of makes the on you kind of message it sends, in a sense that, all these people who have all this confidence about their luck, do you really think that's realistic, that you're going to cast some kind of voodoo spell and everything's going to be okay? And that you have a right to initiate a process that just, like, again, might end up creating orphans and, all that kind of stuff and all kinds of tragedy. Come on, get real. So the other event this week was, kitten. So it does have to be part of, what I observe in the world here. And yeah, I have a I have a bias for them. So there were also raccoons, small raccoons, teenager kind of raccoons, and it's just, you just wonder about the fate. You just, what's going to happen? What's the story going to be? And these aren't going to be good stories, because you see it. Like I said, last year, 5 kittens, none of them made it. This year there's one little kitten, and he's way undersized, and he's kind of on his own already, and he's tiny. So it's not going to be a good story. But terribly cute. So you can take a picture, you can take a frame of his life, and everything looks wonderful. A little sun behind him, and he's sleeping on a little bench, and everything's just fine. But that doesn't feed him. That doesn't keep him warm. It doesn't keep him, safe and all that stuff. So, it's not like I would wish it, but I mean, it'd be nice to be able to have the Jacques Cousteau, let's just follow the kitten through its life and realize that, this is just, let's not keep imposing this. Let's not keep doing this over and over and over again. And this whole human tragedy of all the people who, again, when they're young, they think it's a world to grab and to be had. They think it's something they can, a game they can play and to win. And the older you get, the more you realize, no, you don't win anything, really. You're just in it for the struggle part. You're just in it because the alternative sucks. So you play. And, death sucks. Life sucks, but death sucks also. Showing up to leave is, and it's hard to get out the door. The leaving door isn't just, hey, I'm leaving, goodbye. The leaving door is this unpleasant process, because we can't just turn the switch off. We can't just unplug. You have to go through this process to get unplugged. And the process can be brutal and harsh and full of unpleasant sensations and brain experiences. And so I even force somebody into that horrible dilemma of choosing a life of servitude to a idea that you're going to win somewhere, that you're going to get something durable out of this game. That there's something you're going to be able to take with you, and no, that's not going to happen. You're going to have to lose everything. Okay, everything, every fond thing, every comforting, piece of hardware, your bicycle, your every I can just go back in my life, and the dog, and the first dog, and then the second dog, and then all the cats for 40 years, and all the things that you know and have relationships to, well, and the people, all of that, and it's all just there to be taken away, and that's all it's there. Essentially, it's there just to get you attached, and then you have to detach, and and all you get is little dust. You have a little bit of a lingering odor, or something, but not much more. Last night I was walking a little bit, and go around the block and such now and then, in the dark, and smelled a cigar, but it always reminds me of my grandfather. And then that reminds me of the stories, and then you think of the bullshit that was involved, and he wasn't a very nice guy, that one, that grandfather. Wasn't a very friendly sort. Kind of cranky. And so, there's a whole story. There's a whole piece of the... probably wasn't a great idea to have him play the game, because he just didn't like playing either. I mean, he didn't want to play by friendly rules. He just wanted to play his own game. And he wasn't too interested in, what the rest of the world was trying to accomplish. Yeah, well, anyway. You just, once you open yourself up to these kind of thoughts, it's just so obvious. And if people are doing that kind of thinking, then they're not going to be doing this, oh yes, let's go rush out and start our own experiment. Because it's going to be, the odds are against you. They're not for you. You're not likely to create the winner. You're likely to create the loser. The mediocrity. That's the best you can hope for. Oh, he came in 3rd or 5th. I mean, that's, it's just the truth that only a tiny percentage get through life unscathed. Where they live, a life and then just drop dead of a heart attack or something, and they never had to endure the natural and the hard to avoid attachments that are part of life, and the detachments, the constant cutting of your umbilical cord, umbilical. Yeah, getting old sucks. So that's part of it too. Yeah, so it's all this argument that you're trying to talk to people who really haven't done any of this stuff. They haven't done any of this perspective shit. They haven't watched their brother die, or they haven't really tasted the nasty part of the pill. And those are the people you have to get to. And give them some perspective. And that's a challenge. That's what we're sitting here playing with, and trying to say, how do you do this? How do you send them to the future, to gain an education, without sending them to the future, without actually being able to do that. So you have to create some kind of, you have to give them the wisdom without them having the actual experience. Now, a lot of that, it shouldn't be that difficult to do, just because people have always enjoyed storytelling. It's part of what humans do. They watch a movie or some of the dramatization, and there is a lot more, there's a lot more access to these darker themes in a lot of the media. It's not all fairy tale endings, but it goes both ways. In the sense that you could argue that the people were much more realistic about some of those darker themes in something like the 20s, 1920s, than they were after the war. They became, silly flag waving, myopic, go go go. Don't pause and think kind of attitude. So it's kind of a weird historical record of the light ages versus the dark ages. and what really could be called progress in terms of realistic perspective on life. So, I mean, our culture has obviously been infiltrated by people that are kind of aggressively living. Okay, people desperately running from deprivation, and who are, satisfied with a pretty meager meal, because they had none before, So their standards are pretty low, I guess the argument could be made. So they're aggressive, and in terms of how they live, and they really don't have any of these fear of the tightrope. They're circus performers that just really have a real I'm going to do it, and they really don't, they're really not considering what ifs. So it's, that's sort of a downside. The upside is that, people do have access to these media. There can be conversations about what is intelligent, and so lots of conversations about what intelligence can do with the facts that exist. And really, intelligence can't make gods out of it. It can't make purpose out of it. It can't make any kind of real function. And that, we're basically creating, silly narratives to defend a crude biological function of reproduction, when it doesn't even have its essential purpose, which is evolution. We're not biologically evoluting in any kind of good direction, because we aren't doing the survival of any kind of fitness thing. Okay, there's no standard of fitness that decides survival. You can be a complete fuck up and the system will save you, the safety net. So you're not making good performers. You're making people really good at bouncing on nets. That's sort of the standard, is how good do you bounce on a net, rather than whether you can not fall into a net. So it's it's sort of it's a reversal of the function. And yet they're coming up with justifications to say, well, we have something called a biological clock, and women have to be obedient to it, and all this kind of bullshit. That doesn't really have anything to do with the real story, So there are all these little narratives to find excuses to justify, which is just a bug behavior of, planting your seeds, and creating victims, because that's what they're made to be, as victims. The process doesn't work by making successes. It works by making failures, okay, for the successes to destroy and beat and all of that stuff to prove they're better. So it can't do one without the other. And that notion right there should be the end of the conversation, in the sense that reasonable people should say, well, that's completely backwards. You mean you're making more failure than you are making success. If you can't do better than that, then you shouldn't be doing it. If you're wasting so much, if you're spending so much, that's way too high a price to pay. And that should be a gleanable message out of all of this, that people should be able to understand it as just bad economics. And they should be able to appreciate that they shouldn't be endorsing the waste, because the waste in some way will come out of their hide. Again, it doesn't take much thought. If you were a slave owner, it wouldn't take much thought to think, well, when I do my dust to dust thing, maybe, okay, the day I die, the baby will be born into slavery, the next baby kind of thing, the next human. And what's the difference between that being the same way I got here? It's just going to be delivered and dumped in a location. And if I didn't do anything to stop babies from being dumped in that location, you know, I might as well just do it to myself. I mean, you know. So it's another piece of philosophy that, you know, I keep arguing about, this idea of, you know, it's a subtle form of reincarnation, in the sense that we're all subject to the same rules and we got here the same way. And there's just a process that creates you, you know, an external process. And you have to be able to appreciate that, you know, you were just lucky if you have advantages. You were lucky, you know, nothing else, you know, because you just land here on Earth. You don't get to choose. You don't earn it. You don't earn where you're coming back, you know, where a consciousness is going to land and have to struggle and maybe draw certain conclusions based on the life they're living, and have to have common experiences and all that stuff. And you should be able to just appreciate that. That if you wouldn't want it done to you, why is it okay to do it to somebody else? I mean, that's just too simple a kind of logical theory. And so if you see it happening to other people and you know you wouldn't want it to happen to you, how can you sit there and say it's a good game? I endorse it. Do it some more. When you know that if it happened to you, you wouldn't be saying that. If you had to pay that price, you'd be protesting. I mean, that's the simple truth. You'd say things like, why me? And, you know, as soon as you say that, that's pretty lame. Yeah. You know, because you should have known, you just as well as anyone else. You know, there's no reason for you to believe that there's any superstition. You know, and you step on a crack and it breaks your mother's back, and or you say your little magic words and you're immune to, you know, all the failure, all the ways there are to fail. No. I mean, some you can have some arrogance because you're smart enough to know the basic things, you know, the basics of economics and the basics of, oh, there's a thing called a thief, and I should put my money in my sock, and there's this, you know, and you can do certain things to protect yourself against certain kinds of failure. But realistically, okay, the ones that matter, you can't do much to, you know, there's no place to hide, you know, your money. There's no place to hide your welfare, to guarantee your immunity from the impending doom forces that, you know, it really is just going to be circumstance that's either subjects you to it or frees you or liberates you. It's just not going to be much you have any control over. Again, that should be something everybody feels. You know, they should be able to understand. So again, you know, it's all this idea of how to communicate the message, how to say it, how to convey it, to mean something to somebody who just isn't there yet. You know, who just hasn't gained the perspective, the fear, the worry, the concern. Hasn't perceived the threat. You know, they like dark clouds. They look pretty to them or something. You know, they just don't realize that, you know, it can create the tornado that knocks your house down and, you know, sticks something in your eye. You know. And so, you know, it's like trying to talk to you. You know, I think about it in terms of, well, what, you know, see, I'm a bad example just because I could go back into the past and talk to who I was, and he'd totally understand, you know, because, you know, I was already mostly there. Even as an adolescent, I had already figured out that, you know, the game wasn't very good. So it wouldn't be very hard to convince me that there's this whole philosophical understanding. Even though I didn't, you know, at 7 years old, I didn't have a great context in terms of not understanding fully on evolution and, you know, all the social mechanisms and, you know, all the fact that my consciousness was just being contrived by a bunch of reflexes associated with words and what color hat somebody was wearing and all kinds of silly stuff was deciding how my brain made decisions. I wasn't didn't have all of that context to make it even clearer. But I certainly knew if there was an exit and you could gracefully just walk out, that I wasn't at all going to be difficult to persuade me that, yes, let's get the hell out of here before something goes wrong. Even though I had desire and I had will to accomplish and prove something, and I was competitive, I already did kind of know that it was meaningless, and it wasn't going to fix all that was broken, and was never going to be as good as it should be, and all of that crap. And certainly what happens to me isn't going to fix the condition the rest of the world is in. So that's another context, that if you walk away without fixing it, you're not going to win. You're just going to be a rat that escaped the maze, but the maze continues. The game continues. So you haven't liberated anything. You left all the slaves, kind of thing. You weren't very heroic. I don't know. Like I said, don't really want to imply that we have obligation, but we sort of do. But I don't want to put any burden on people who are really at risk in terms of things getting way out of hand in terms of what happens to them personally. So I don't want anyone to ever feel obligated to live, to facilitate, the closing of the shop, and I don't want them to have to stay at work, late, to clean it up. But it's kind of hard to avoid the fact that we are all responsible. Somebody's got to do it. And so everybody can't say, I have a prior engagement, I hurt my pinky, so I can't lift anything. We all can't find excuses to bail on the obligation to try to do the future a favor and such. Alright, so that's enough of a beginning. So I'll take a little break and see where else we go. So, yeah, I'll be back. Alright, should be back. So, over the last 10 minutes I thought of some different things, and then I thought of a memory of, when I was a kid, and I would babysit now and then just to make some money. I did anything I could do to make money. I liked money. But this one I don't even think I got paid, actually. It was just some kind of church duty, for which, I had no interest, but it was sort of at my mother's insistence that, we pretend to be churchgoers or whatever. Well, anyway, so I used to babysit a little mongoloid kid, and it was just such a, it's one of those things, like a walk through the nursing home. It's just such a life lesson, in terms of what a mess, so, they had a daughter, so there's a couple, right? And so, yeah, obviously they're religious kooks. They were the minister and the wife. And, they're Methodist, so, obviously he's, can have a family. And the irony is, it's just so ironic, right? Because in the Bible, there's whole, rhetoric about how you really shouldn't be having a family because you can't be devoted to God and your family, and so that's the whole reason why priests are supposed to be celibate, is because it's too much of a distraction, a family. And this was, obviously the case here. So anyway, so everything went, they had a daughter, beautiful, beautiful girl. And then the next kid, mongoloid. And, severe, not just a little retarded, but, really just totally fucked up. And he was, you know, he was a human in, you know, just barely, but he was constantly in angst. You know, constantly couldn't find the levers to pull in the world. One of the levers was my hair. He would pull that because it comforted him, because he didn't have any hair. And you know, like my enemies, you know, he would actually, he liked to wear a, you know, a blonde wig. You know, that's how much of an affinity he had for my hair. But anyway, it was just so, but it's just such a life lesson in terms of all the tragedy involved and how it just consumed and ruined the family. I mean, they ended up divorced. They ended up, you know, the daughter, I think, I don't think she would have a kid, you know, I think, but I think she had so much resentment for the life she didn't have. You know, her whole youth was, you know, babysitting, probably, you know. And I remember the look of gratitude on her face whenever I showed up, because that meant she was free, you know, that kind of thing. And, you know, those little things stick in your head, you know, and just, you know, because you don't even appreciate, you know, I did it, you know, once every couple of weeks. I guess there were some periods where it was once a week, but you know, for a few hours, you know, just to imagine having to live with it all the time would, you know, it would just, you know, the burden of that is just so, and for people to be so glib about it, you know, and there's so many people with autistic kids now. You'd think, you know, but they just do the stoic thing, you know, instead of the holy shit, this is awful. And, you know, please just think about it before you step into this mud. Think about it, because it's not going to be any fun. Okay, there's really not going to be any fun in it. It's just going to be, you know, a horrible, difficult, uphill, struggly kind of thing. I mean, every little, once in a while you get a grip and you think you're going to be able to climb, and all of a sudden that grip's going to disappear and you're going to be slipping and sliding backwards, and, you know, that's all it is. And his, you know, and then the victim, you know, the even bigger victim. So the family was ruined, and the victim, real victim, is the kid who really had a horrible life. I mean, he had to endure surgeries because his heart was too big, multiple ones, and he died at 18. I mean, you know, there's just nothing good in this story. It's just a horrible, awful train wreck. And, you know, people will turn that into some sort of great adventure. It wasn't a great adventure. It wasn't some, you know, life lesson. You know, there can't be a sunrise without a sunset, or something. You know, they'll put some cliche on top of it and just try to pretend it wasn't just horrible waste. And it was just horrible waste. A bunch of emotional stress and pain. You know, nothing to be gained. You don't need to redo these stories. You don't need to just reinvite the monster, you know. Just clean house and be done with it. Don't let anybody in to mess it up anymore. Make it peaceful. You know, just give up on this fable that you're going to write a new story that's going to mean anything, because you're really not. There's no, I'm going to, you know, create a new story. There's not going to be a new story. It's just going to be life and death. And yeah, you might be lucky and you might create a nihilist, selfish bastard who dies young. But if you create somebody who has any kind of character or any kind of sensitivity, who has learned anything in life, they're not going to just walk through this mess and say, I don't see anything. You know, it's not going to be how they're going to see the world. And I guess that's part of it. I mean, some people really don't. They really can't. They're so caught up in their own internal noise that they can't even appreciate the argument, you know, in the sense of understanding that all these other people they see, all these other train wrecks involve real people. They really do think it's a movie or something. You know, it's just actors. You know, they're just playing a role. They're not really going through anything. They're not really experiencing any horror. That kind of thing. So the thing that popped in my head is, you know, it's sort of the thing that I don't, you know, it's not a subject I like to touch on just because I don't know what to, I have such admiration for people who do work at nursing homes and do work in hospitals and do all of this stuff. But at the same time, I have to say, what kind of sadist are they? You know, what kind of, how do you do that? I mean, how do you witness, you know, all of this failure without it doing something to you? It'd be interesting to get the, like, how many people work at a nursing home and then go home to the wife and kids, you know, or to the husband and kids. You know, how many, you know, how many, because it just doesn't, there doesn't seem any way you can connect those two dots and make sense out of it. You know, this idea of having some optimism when you see how it doesn't matter. Successful, unsuccessful, jackass, nice guy, it doesn't matter who they are, they end up in this terrible condition and in this trap, and, you know, trapped in bodies that are a mess, and, you know, all of that stuff, and losing their minds, and all, you know, it's just so bad. Becoming, you know, just not even 1% of who they are. There's so little relationship to the person they were. You know, how can you witness that and then say, oh yeah, I have lots of optimism. I'm very optimistic about the future. Why? Because you have a plan for yourself to escape? I mean, you have your own personal escape hatch, and so you know it's going to be okay because you know how much medication to take and get the hell out? I mean, what's the plan for all of the people who are sitting here waiting for the space station to lose its oxygen and it's, you know, time to suffocate? Or what's the plan for them? You know, they're going to be tortured for 10 years in a, you know, half vegetative state. So anyway, yeah, so I don't know what to say on that one, because that's such a weird, I can't imagine that psychological condition where you're so immune or capable of turning it off or capable of it not bothering you. I just don't know how they do that. I mean, it's, you could say it's something like working in a slaughterhouse. I don't know. You know, it just, I mean, that's a little more benign because, you know, frankly, most of the time you're not torturing animals. I mean, most people working at a slaughterhouse aren't doing the malicious, sadistic, evil things. You know, they're just doing their little, you know, pop it dead, you know, kill it and then, you know, carve it up. So, I mean, not that that's not ugly, but I just mean it's not nearly as ugly as watching them die of infections and, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's like even farmers, you know, how do they do that crap? How do they raise something and then kill it? I mean, how do they not, every day they go in and they talk to it and they feed it and they, you know, they have a relationship to it, and then they could just walk in one day and, you know, start hacking at its jugular vein. I just don't know how that works. I don't know how that kind of brain works. So it's hard to, it's like even dogfight people, you know, they raise their chickens or they raise their dogs, you know, for these stupid events, and just to watch them get the shit kicked out of them. And how can they, you know, you know, I don't know how you do that. How do you do that? I mean, what kind of brain do you have to be so, I mean, I'm not gonna, you know, we'll call it evil, crazy, insane. I mean, I don't know what to call that. You know, that you would put your friend, you know, in that kind of jeopardy. So anyway, this is stuff, you know, you wonder, you know, there's some psychologies I guess you could never get through because they're so nihilistic. They're so solipsistic. They're so lost in just winning, and playing. They're just they're looking at so few squares on the chessboard. So it's possible, that all they see is the they don't see it as anything other than some kind of inanimate game, rather than one full of beings like themselves struggling, to find some sort of saleable boat. Anyway, so the brain went a little dark there. I didn't go anywhere good. So again, I'm not, obviously there's people in healthcare that maybe just have found a way to psychologically do their job without it destroying them, and can't say that's not possible. I just find it hard to understand, just because I'm way too squeamish, I guess. It's just I couldn't go to a nursing home every day, and then have any enthusiasm for even eating your dinner. I mean, it just all would seem horribly inadequate. There just wouldn't seem to be much to compensate for the downer. The downer would be such a powerful pill that you just can't imagine something to get you up enough, to give a damn. Something like that, anyway. So that's a little personal narrative thrown in. So it's sort of like Life Sucks video is just reflections of his own reaction to the life presented him, and the circumstances imposed on him, and clearly imposed. It's, there aren't really choices, to just walk away, and both for your own good and for their good, and it's might cripple you, might permanently damage you. These life experiences that they build your character, but they can build your mind while they destroy the body, so to speak, the part that needs to interact with the world in something other than a fearful way. I mean, you really just can't live in doing constant calculations about the odds that today will be, the odds of getting this, or the odds of that happening, or, you really can't live that way. It's just, you have keys to unlock the key lock, to unlock the key lock, to unlock the lock to the key to the lock, that kind of thing. You can't, there's no safe rooms you can actually build, because something can always seep in. Okay, it's, you're still vulnerable. There's no bubble, whatever, blah blah blah, to protect you. Alright, that seems like a reasonable addition. So I'll take one more pause, and then I'll, or not, sum up in some way. Blah blah. Alright, should be back. Alright, so anyways, continuing. So, in the end, this is really just a conversation about people who do have some kind of philosophical perspective that understands we're in a universe that really doesn't care about any, it doesn't have any values, okay? It doesn't have any capacity to understand that it's made monsters that have needs and that can manifest the value of experience. That the only real thing in the universe that has any value is actually our valuing experience, the experience of having a conscious mechanism that creates a valuable sensation, a sensation that's negative and a sensation that's positive, or unnegative is really the bottom line, right? The whip being removed is what we really feed on, and there's no carrot on a stick. There's just stopping the whip, frankly. And having those kind of bits of understanding versus some Pollyanna silly view that there's silver linings just over the horizon, and there's all kinds of stuff that'll save the day in the future, will show up with all kinds of technology that'll somehow make it all make sense, when no, of course it won't. It'll just make the stories more controllable, but it won't make storytelling have any meaning, beyond appreciating, this the vulnerability in it all. I mean, we could play a simple tune, whatever the song is, Yankee Doodle, blah blah blah. You can have some simple little tune, or you can have a symphony, and the symphony's it's gonna have more in it, and the more in it's gonna mean it's gonna be too complicated, or it's gonna have to let the negative in. So if you're gonna create some future where you're gonna make happy people, well, they're not gonna be happy people contemplating reality. They're gonna be happy people living a trivial, silly, manufactured, tic-tac-toe existence. They're not going to be living in reality. They're going to be living in some silly little delusion, some little fake story. And that should be perceived as a humiliation. You should be humiliated to be satisfied with being, a battery in the matrix. That shouldn't be something that you say, gee, that's great. That's all I need. I want to be a battery. Not that, like I said, a fake world is just that, a fake world. Contrived. To what? To do something that doesn't need to get done. To satisfy the needs of machines that shouldn't even need to do anything either. What's the machine's agenda? What are they trying to accomplish? Kill the human, or something, make batteries. That's it. They're trying to just accomplish that. No real point in it. Just so they can create another synthetic thing that thinks it's doing something, a controller that isn't controlling really anything that matters. Well, anyway, I don't want to get too... The language just starts to get kind of sloppy when you try to do these simple metaphors for the idea of understanding how this is just a square peg round hole game, but there's no point in it. There's no need to bother with it. There's no purpose in actually filling the square hole with a square peg, or filling the round hole with a round peg. It's not going to matter. It's not going to mean anything. It's not going to fix anything. It's not going to do anything. And our presence here is as meaningless as would be the presence of Martians or any other kind of silly thing that isn't here now. You can just invent all kinds of silly things to exist, but they're not going to have any function. They're not going to save the universe from something. They're not going to stop a whip. And that's all there really is to do here, is to put your hand up and stop the whip. That's it. And the whip starts at birth. Quite, literally starts at birth with the first little whack. But anyway, I'm sure it's a struggle, inside of the, in the aqua world, in our origin in the ocean. It's funny, we're just so obviously fish, right? I mean, we develop as a fish. We're a fish until we're born, and then all of a sudden we're supposed to be something else. Just all kind of ironic. But anyway, so this really just is an argument between smart and dumb. Because yes, the dumb people will invent fairy tale purposes, and they'll pretend I'm fighting dragons, and they're winning with their little foil covered, cardboard sword. Yeah, you're winning. You're winning. No, you're retarded. So anyway, simple minds, simple entertainments, and all that kind of crap. So, yeah, so underlying all of this is that, it has to be, frankly, we have to start, playing the movie in theaters where the dumb people are, because obviously in these obscure videos that are only going to get clicked on people searching for something philosophical, you could argue, and that's not what the ignorant masses are doing. So maybe we'll have to dress as a squirrel or something. I don't know. Squirrel videos get a lot of views. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe I have to go actually literally, out in the yard and throw a hammer in the air and have it hit me in the head and film it. And then people will watch it because it'll be a great fail video. People love that kind of crap. But anyway, it's just, people. I mean, you have to use the word so loosely because, yeah, a lot of people aren't really people. They're so frickin' stupid. But anyway, ill-exposed to any elements of reality. They're so lost in just such a silly, stupid narrative of their jive talking and their, style, vogossery, just voguing their I'm cool kind of crap and all the rest of that shit. They're Facebooking, Yuck. Anyway, so, yeah, I think that's enough of a video and such. Yeah, I think that's enough. I could probably do one more, but the hell with it. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. So, I do often intend to do some sidetracking and do some other subjects and stuff, but it just hasn't happened. There's always something happens, right? All this unanticipated doom that's always surrounding you and falls on you, and distractions and whatnot. So, so far I haven't gotten past that, being distracted by real life. So anyway, see how it goes. Yeah, that's what we'll do. We'll just see what happens. Can't do much else. Alright, so till the next time, and such, and so forth, and whatnot. I think I'll wait for, wasteful is a good word, but this image isn't really, it's got too much sunshine in it. Yeah, so I'll wait for a darker one. There, that's a better one. Yeah, foolish. Okay, so, till the next time, and such. So forth and whatnot.